In the shadow of modern geopolitical discourse, the Palestinian people endure a life marred by systemic oppression and daily hardships under Israeli rule. Their reality is punctuated by restricted movement, economic disenfranchisement, and a perpetual state of uncertainty about their future. The streets of Gaza and the West Bank tell stories not just of conflict, but of a deep-seated apartheid that slices through the very fabric of daily existence. In the cities and villages, Palestinian homes often bear the scars of conflict, while checkpoints dissect their lands and lives. Children grow up under the heavy gaze of surveillance, their youth overshadowed by a conflict they inherited but did not choose. Marketplaces buzz with the vibrant resilience of a people striving against the odds to maintain a semblance of normalcy amidst chaos. The term apartheid, referring to an institutionalized system of racial segregation and discrimination, finds its roots in the South African regime, yet it is tragically applicable in the context of Israeli-Palestinian relations. This systematic oppression began to take a more structured form following the 1967 Six-Day War, when Israel captured Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. These territories, rich in history and culture, became the ground zero for what many international observers have labeled an apartheid state. Land expropriation and settlement expansions were policies implemented with vigor, effectively squeezing the indigenous Palestinian populations into progressively smaller and more fragmented parcels of land. Laws favoring Jewish settlers and discriminating against Palestinians became commonplace, drawing stark parallels to the past laws of apartheid South Africa. These policies were not mere incidents of discrimination, but a deliberate structuring of space that entrenched division. The international community has often stood divided on this issue, with numerous UN resolutions condemning the settlements and the treatment of Palestinians, yet comprehensive action remains elusive. The repetitive cycles of peace talks and diplomatic discussions have frequently been undercut by further settlement expansions and military incursions, making a mockery of the peace process. Everyday life for a Palestinian is a navigation through a labyrinth of surveillance, with CCTV cameras and drones becoming as common as the birds in the sky. The Israeli security apparatus extends deeply into the day-to-day existence of the Palestinian people, monitoring movements and stifling voices of dissent. This high-tech surveillance is not just about security, but a clear expression of dominance and control, casting a shadow over freedom. The architecture of apartheid is also vividly visible in the physical landscape. Roads are segregated, with some designated for Israeli use and others for Palestinians, often in poorer condition and subject to frequent closures. The infamous separation barrier, extending hundreds of kilometers, not only divides communities but also severs farmers from their land, children from their schools, and the sick from necessary healthcare facilities. Education and health services are starkly disparate in quality between Israeli and Palestinian areas. Palestinian schools and hospitals struggle with underfunding and restrictions on equipment and supplies, directly impacting the rights and futures of an entire generation. These institutions, rather than being sanctuaries of learning and healing, are often frontline zones of conflict and suppression. The legal instruments that cement Israeli control over Palestinian lives are numerous and complex. At the heart of this legal arsenal are the laws that distinguish between citizens based on their ethnic backgrounds, bestowing privileges on Jewish Israelis while marginalizing Palestinians. The nation-state law of 2018, for example, explicitly affirmed the State of Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people, igniting international uproar over its implications for non-Jewish citizens. International legal bodies, including the United Nations and the International Court of Justice, have repeatedly highlighted the violations of international law in these practices. The apartheid analogy has gained traction with organizations like Human Rights Watch and the Israeli rights group B'Tselem, affirming that Israel's practices in the occupied territories do indeed amount to apartheid. Despite these denunciations, international responses have been inconsistent. While some countries and organizations advocate for sanctions and a more rigorous enforcement of international law, others maintain strategic alliances with Israel, complicating global efforts to address the injustices. This disparity in international action reflects the complex geopolitics surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In recent years, specific incidents have exemplified the harsh realities of apartheid. The 2021 raids on Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, a holy site for Muslims, resulted in widespread international condemnation and a subsequent escalation in violence. These events highlight how religious sites become flashpoints, exacerbating tensions and perpetuating cycles of violence. Moreover, the ongoing blockade of Gaza has resulted in a humanitarian crisis, with essential supplies and medical aid being severely restricted. The Gaza Strip, often described as the world's largest open-air prison, showcases the extreme conditions under which many Palestinians live. The blockade is defended by Israel as a necessary security measure, but critics argue that it collectively punishes the entire population of Gaza. The resilience of the Palestinian people is evident in their ongoing protests and calls for justice. Despite facing considerable risks, they continue to stand up against oppressive policies, organizing demonstrations and seeking legal avenues to contest land seizures and demolitions. Their struggle is not just for land, but for dignity, freedom, and the right to self-determination. The plight of the Palestinian people under Israeli apartheid is not just a regional issue, but a test of global moral fiber and the effectiveness of international law. It challenges the world to reflect on its principles of human rights and justice. The international community must not remain passive observers, but active participants in advocating for and supporting the rights of Palestinians. As readers and global citizens, our role extends beyond passive concern. We are called upon to educate ourselves, raise awareness, and pressure our governments to uphold international standards of human rights. The story of Palestinian struggle is a call to action, urging us to transform our empathy into tangible support and to ensure that the dark shadows of apartheid do not cloud the future of yet another generation.